Good day, everyone, and welcome to the channel. If you have a story that you would like me to bring to life for you, check the description below for my email and send it over. My mom wanted me to tell you to not subscribe to the channel because she wants me to get a real job. I hope you enjoy the story. Huh. What is this? No. No. Max? Can you come here? It was a typical Tuesday afternoon when I received a call that would change everything for my family. Mrs. Turner, Max's elementary school teacher, sounded unusually tense. She told me that someone had tried to pick up Max from school, claiming to be his older brother. My heart skipped a beat because Max didn't have an older brother. The man knew our address, Max's full name, his birthday, and everything. Mrs. Turner described him as a tall, lanky guy with black hair, probably in his late 30s or even 40s. She had gone inside to check with the principal, and when she returned, the man had vanished. I stood outside the school gate, the playground eerily empty except for a few birds pecking at the ground. My mind raced with questions and fears because I didn't know where Max was at that very moment. Miss Turner assured me he was safe in the principal's office, so I followed her across the playground and through the corridors, my legs just feeling like jelly. In the principal's office, my 8-year-old son Max sat on a couch looking distant and unfocused. The principal sat behind her desk and a police officer stood nearby. I knelt in front of Max trying to gauge his reaction, and he nodded slightly when I asked him if he was okay, but his eyes, they still remained distant. Max has always been a quiet boy that basically kept to himself. It was just the two of us at home, so we didn't exactly have the best example of what it was like growing up in a social environment. I was a single dad as my late wife Laura, Max's mother, had died a year prior. She'd been hit by a car one day while cycling around a sharp bend, and it was a horrific tragedy because she had ridden that bend every day and always took extra precaution to account for bad drivers. It truly was a tragedy because the driver fled the scene and was never identified. I won't go into any more detail here, as I'd rather not relive that period, but suffice it to say that it shattered me. I tried to pick up the pieces and stay strong for Max, but was I doing a good job? Only God knows. I received no feedback at all his entire childhood. Since then, Max has become even more withdrawn, pretty much remaining silent until spoken to. He was seen by a child psychologist and various welfare team members at his school, but after assessment, they concluded that he didn't have autism or any other related conditions that would explain his behavior. He had no problem speaking clearly when pressed to do so, but he definitely preferred to just remain silent if he could get away with it. The police officer confirmed my identity and asked me a series of questions, and then assured me that he would try to locate the suspect and advise me to report any future sightings. Everything else was a blur as I grappled with the reality that someone had attempted to kidnap my son. From that day onwards, I lived in a constant state of vigilance. Max, he became my entire world, and I couldn't bear the thought of a potential danger lurking around every corner. Who was this mysterious stranger, and why target my son specifically? Was it a random creep or someone familiar? I started walking Max to school daily, ensuring I was never late to pick him up. Max seemed generally unfazed by the incident, rarely mentioning it unless he was prompted to do so. I just assumed it was his shyness that prevented him from making a fuss. Weeks later, Miss Turner called me again during her lunch break to report another sighting. A student claimed to have seen Max conversing with a man through the fence at recess. When Miss Turner rushed outside, the man had disappeared. Questioning Max after the incident yielded no answers, and he denied any interaction at all. The girl who reported it was adamant that the description matched exactly the previous encounter, a tall, lanky man with black hair. The cops did end up conducting a search, but they found nothing suspicious. That afternoon, when we got home, I decided to confront Max at the kitchen table. I needed the truth about whether he had tried to talk to a stranger at school. Max ended up giving me evasive responses which frustrated me, and so I raised my voice at him without realizing it. Exhausted and overwhelmed, I retreated to bed early. In the early hours of the morning, I went for a bathroom trip and decided to check on Max. When I saw that he wasn't in his room, panic set in as I frantically searched the house calling his name. I even checked impossible hiding spots, fearing the worst, and just as I was about to call the police, I found him sitting on his bed, just staring blankly. Relief mingled with anger as I demanded to know where he had been, and he calmly replied that he had been here all along. The window was wide open, but I dismissed it in my confusion and paranoia. A year passed without incident until one day, while doing paperwork at home, I heard a knock on the door. At the time, Max was always essentially locked in his room just playing Minecraft, and it was very rare that someone would come to the door to knock on it unannounced. I checked through the peephole but saw no one. Dismissing it as a mistake, I returned to my work only to hear the door knock again moments later. Something was wrong. I checked the peephole again and still nothing. I decided to text my upstairs neighbor, because we were friendly, asking him if he had knocked on my door. Moments later, I heard footsteps overhead and received a chilling response. Do not open the door. There's a guy with a huge knife hiding next to your door. I'm calling the police. Paralyzed with fear, I tiptoed to Max's room and whispered urgently for him to stay inside and keep quiet. My heart began racing as I grabbed a kitchen knife and stood guard outside of his room, praying for our safety. After what felt like an eternity, sirens echoed in the distance and my heart began to slow. Eventually, an authoritative voice announced the presence of the police and they knocked on the door. They reassured us that they had apprehended the suspect, a drifter named Gregory involved in petty crimes and even murder. The psychological scars from that day lingered, but I was grateful for our safety. Now, 10 years later, as Max prepared to leave for college, I discovered an old notebook labeled Max's Diary while cleaning out his room one day. Me being his father, of course, piqued my curiosity, so I flipped through the mundane entries until I reached page 21. It was titled, "Why Does Dad Talk So Much? He Won't Let Me Get an Xbox or Sleep Over at Cody's House. Talking back is useless, I hate him." Guilt washed over me as I turned the page to page 22, and the title for that page was extremely unsettling. It was titled, "Saw Greg Today. He Says He Can Help Me Get Rid of Dad." My mind immediately set into panic as I continued reading and connected the dots because what I saw on the pages before me was an exact drawing of Gregory's failed attempt to take my life that day. I decided to confront Max before he left for college because I needed to know the truth for myself. I recall incidences in this notebook seeing a person on a bike and a long, lanky man with black hair, and I had to know the truth for myself. So I asked him, "Max, did you have anything to do with your mother's death?" Without hesitation, he looked at me and smiled. Max walked away without looking back, leaving me with sleepless nights, pondering whether or not it was my fault or if he was born this way. We hadn't spoken since that day, and he hasn't tried to contact me either.